The crimson moon of Varkoth hung heavy in the alien sky, casting blood-red shadows across the jagged crystalline forest. Kiro pressed his small body against the cold rock face, his 8-year-old heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst through his ribs. The creatures circling him were unlike anything from Earth's nightmares, 6-legged predators the size of grizzly bears, with obsidian scales that clicked and scraped against stone, and rows of translucent teeth that dripped luminescent venom. Shadowmaws, the Varkothian traders had called them, the deadliest apex predators in this sector of the galaxy. Kiro had been on Varkoth for exactly 17 hours. 17 hours since the raiders had stormed his family's research station on the Outer Rim. 17 hours since he'd watched his parents dragged away in electromagnetic restraints, their screams still echoing in his memory. The raiders had thrown him in a cargo hold with other exotic specimens, but during the chaos of a pirate ambush, Kiro had escaped into the wilderness. Now he wished he'd stayed in that cage. The largest Shadowmaw scarred beast with one milky eye stalked closer, its 4 front limbs spreading wide as its powerful hind legs coiled for the killing pounce. Kiro could smell the stench of rotting meat on its breath, could see the intelligence gleaming in its good eye. These weren't mindless animals. They were hunting him with purpose, with strategy. The pack had corralled him perfectly. 7 Shadowmaws formed a tightening semicircle, cutting off every escape route. Kiro clutched a sharp rock in his trembling hand, a pathetic weapon against certain death. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice cracking with terror and false bravado. The Shadowmaws didn't understand English, but they understood fear. The scarred leader's mouth split into what could only be described as a grin. Then, cutting through the alien night like a plasma blade, came a sound that made every Shadowmaw freeze mid-step. A howl, but not the clicking, chittering vocalizations of Varkoth's fauna. This was something primal, something that resonated in the genetic memory of predator species across 1,000 worlds. It was the sound of Earth raw, defiant, and absolutely furious. The underbrush exploded. Nova crashed into the clearing like a vengeful god, and Kiro's breath caught in his throat. She wore the tattered remains of a research station jumpsuit, her dark skin covered in cuts and bruises, her black hair wild and matted with dried blood. But her eyes burned with something the Shadowmaws had never encountered before. Human protective rage. The scarred Shadowmaw whirled to face this new threat, its venom-dripping maw opening wide in a territorial challenge. Nova didn't slow down. She grabbed a fallen crystal branch thick as her forearm and sharp as any blade and drove it straight through the creature's mouth and out the back of its skull with such force that the Shadowmaw was dead before its body understood what had happened. The pack scattered backward, shocked. Prey didn't fight back, prey didn't kill. But Nova wasn't prey. She positioned herself between Kiro and the remaining 6 Shadowmaws, her improvised spear slick with alien blood, her chest heaving. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite her ragged breathing. "You okay, kid? I thought everyone was—" Kiro couldn't finish the sentence. "I got away. Tracked you for 6 hours." Nova never took her eyes off the circling predators. "These things hunt in packs. They're smart. But they've never hunted a human before." The Shadowmaws regrouped, their initial shock replaced by cold calculation. 2 split off to flank them, while 4 prepared for a frontal assault. They'd adapted their strategy already. Nova smiled, and it was a terrible thing to witness. "Kiro, when I say run, you sprint toward that cluster of crystal formations at my 7 o'clock. There's a cave entrance. You hide there and you don't come out until I get you. Understand?" "But they'll kill you." "Kid, I'm from Chicago. I've dealt with worse on the Red Line at 2 a.m. She shifted her grip on the spear. "Besides, these monsters made a fatal mistake." "What mistake?" Nova's eyes flashed with predatory intent that made even the Shadowmaws hesitate. They threatened a human child. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. The Shadowmaws had learned their lesson, no more single combat. But they hadn't learned enough. Nova spun with the first lunging predator, using its momentum to redirect it into the path of the second. As they collided in a tangle of clicking scales and snapping jaws, she drove her spear through both their necks in one brutal thrust. The 3rd Shadowmaw raked its claws across her shoulder, drawing blood, but Nova didn't even flinch. She grabbed its foreleg mid-swipe, twisted with every ounce of desperate strength her adrenaline-flooded body could muster, and broke the limb with a sickening crack. The creature's scream echoed across the crystalline forest. Run, Kiro! The boy didn't need to be told twice. He bolted for the cave as Nova turned to face the remaining 3 shadow maws. They circled her warily now, reassessing. This wasn't prey behavior. This was something else entirely, something that frightened them on an instinctual level. Humans didn't just fight back. They fought with a ferocity that defied logic, that ignored pain, that transformed protective instinct into unstoppable violence. Nova grabbed a handful of the luminescent fungi coating the nearby rocks and hurled it at the closest Shadowmaw's eyes. The creature recoiled, temporarily blinded, and she used that split-second advantage to drive her boot into its ribcage with enough force to crack the exoskeletal plates. As it staggered, she yanked her spear free from the tangled corpses and swung it like a baseball bat, catching another Shadowmaw across its skull. The last Shadowmaw, younger, less experienced, made the final mistake of charging head-on. Nova sidestepped at the last possible moment, letting 600 pounds of alien predator crash past her. Before it could recover, she was on its back, wrapping her bleeding arm around its throat in a chokehold that would have made her marine father proud. The Shadowmaw bucked and thrashed, its powerful legs gouging trenches in the ground, but Nova held on with the grim determination of someone who had absolutely nothing left to lose. 30 seconds of desperate struggle. 45. A full minute of refusing to let go even as her muscles screamed and her vision swam with exhaustion. Finally, the Shadowmaw went limp. Nova collapsed beside it, gasping for air, every inch of her body screaming in agony. But she forced herself up, limp to the cave entrance where Kiro huddled with wide, disbelieving eyes. You killed them all," the boy whispered. Nova slumped against the cave wall, managing a weak smile through the blood and sweat. "Told you. Worst things in Chicago. Why did you come back for me? You could have escaped." She reached out and ruffled his hair with a shaking hand. "Because that's what humans do, kid. We protect our own. Doesn't matter if we just met, doesn't matter if the odds are impossible. You're human, you're a child, and that means something above them." The first light of Varkoth's binary sunrise began to paint the sky in shades of amber and violet. In the distance, the sound of rescue shuttles finally penetrated the atmosphere, the cavalry arriving too late, as always. But it didn't matter. Because the galaxy had just learned a fundamental truth about humanity that would echo across the stars for generations to come. You could kidnap a human, you could hunt a human, you could even kill a human. But if you threaten a human child, you don't face a victim. You face a species that conquered its own planet's apex predators, climbed to the top of the food chain through sheer stubborn will, and never ever forgot what it meant to protect its young. The Shadowmaws of Varkoth were the deadliest predators in their sector. But they'd never met a human mother before. And that made all the difference.